The fat around your waist isn't just sitting there, right? It's an endocrine organ, and that means that it's producing hormones every day and it's actively working against you, right? So you can be training 4 times a week, maybe less, maybe more. You can be eating clean as possible. You can be showing up for yourself every single day, right? But still be carrying this type of fat that is actively working against everything that you're trying to build. And it's different than the fat that you can see, right? It's not the fat that I can pinch right now. It's not the fat that you can see around your body. It's inside, packed around your internal organs. And that fat is obviously called visceral fat, and it operates on a much different level than you think. Today, I'm breaking down everything you need to know about this dangerous type of fat, right? And I'm going to do it in 4 different sections. Section number 1 is what actually is visceral fat, right? Section 2 is going to be how it's produced. Section 3 is what it's actually doing to your performance mentally and physically. And then finishing up with section 4, how to actually reverse it and eliminate it, right? So again, just breaking everything down so you have the best understanding and new knowledge base around these 2 types of fats that we're going to talk about today. But most importantly, the main topic of this video is that dangerous type of fat that you want to avoid and eliminate as soon as possible. So starting off with section 1, what actually is visceral fat? All right, there's 2 types of fat in your body, but they do 2 completely different things. The first one is subcutaneous fat, and that is the fat that you can see, right, around your muscles. That when you get leaner, you see that muscle definition. That's just that subcutaneous fat, again, around your body that you see in the mirror. And that fat really isn't doing anything, right? It's just kind of there. If you gain too much of it by eating too much, you're not lean. You don't see that muscle definition, and it's not really doing too much to you, right? So that's subcutaneous fat. On the other side is visceral fat, right? And this is obviously that dangerous kind of fat because it is metabolically active, right? It's surrounding your internal organs. Again, it's packed in there. You can't see it, and it functions like an organ of its own, releasing hormones, releasing inflammatory compounds actively throughout the day through your bloodstream. And so again, there's a critical distinction between the 2. There can be 2 men. They can both have the same waist size. You take a tape measure and you measure their waist, and they have the same waist size, right? But person A has that subcutaneous fat around his waist, and person B has more visceral fat, right, packed in there. They have the same waist size, but that person B is acting on a different operating level, much different than person A, and he's most importantly feeling all of the negative side effects of too much visceral fat. So that was section 1, very, very simple, the distinction between the 2, subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Moving on to section 2, how visceral fat is actually produced, right? So the cause is not from just eating too much, right? That's the fitness industry's default that they blame it on, right? But that's not the truth. The main driver of this production of this dangerous type of fat is chronic cortisol. So here's how the mechanism works. Your body has these cortisol receptors concentrated in your visceral fat cells themselves. And so when you're under a lot of stress running a company, right, your job is very high stress and high pressure, very demanding on you. You're a father, right? A lot of responsibilities. When you're under a lot of stress, your cortisol stays chronically elevated, right? Your body's never able to come back down to a calm state, and it's never able to have that good sort of spike of cortisol and consistent drop, right? I've said it many times before. Cortisol is not bad, right? Cortisol, yes, is your stress response, is a stress hormone, but cortisol is not bad. It only gets bad when it's chronically elevated, right? You want cortisol when you're in a sports game, when you are running, when you're working out, right? When you want to be alert, when you want to be on in a sales meeting, for example, a job interview, right? Again, just all these examples, you want to be on mentally, you want to be alert, you want to be sharp. That has your cortisol. Your cortisol is helping you, right? But then any other time throughout the day, you want to be in a calm state. So it has a spike and it has a drop. And this is the consistent cortisol rhythm that you want to see throughout your day. But again, it's bad when it stays chronically elevated. And elevated cortisol does 2 things simultaneously. The first one is it tells your body to store fat viscerally, around your organs dangerously, right? So too much cortisol, again, your brain thinks, okay, we need to just store this energy around our organs as a survival mechanism because we're always stressed. And then the second one is it drives insulin resistance, which is, very similar to what I just talked about. It causes your body to hold fat around those internal organs once again. And so this is exactly why someone like a CEO, someone with a very demanding, high stressful, high pressure lifestyle is going to carry more visceral fat than someone else with a worse diet, right? Maybe the CEO is eating relatively clean, taking care of their health, but they're chronically stressed. They're doing everything right except managing their stress. They're going to hold more visceral fat, dangerously fat, rather than, again, someone with a worse diet, but they don't have so much of a stress lifestyle. So the input, obviously, that matters most here and generally with health is not necessarily just food and your nutrition, right? It's your stress and your load capacity that you can handle on your nervous system, right? And when that's broken, good nutrition can only do so much. So that was section 2, exactly how visceral fat is gained and produced over time. Now, moving on to section 3, the most important section that we'll talk about today, what it's actually doing to your overall performance, not just in the gym, not just physically, right, but mentally as well, cognitively. And so this is where it gets serious, right? Visceral fat is not a passive marker of overall just poor health, right? Oh, I'm just unhealthy, right? I feel okay, but I don't like how I look in the mirror. That's not what this is about. That visceral fat is a driver to your decline. So there's multiple pieces in this section that we're talking about, right? But that first piece to this is how it disrupts your hormones. Visceral fat contains an enzyme called aromatase, right? And aromatase literally, it converts testosterone into estrogen. As a man, that's obviously exactly what you don't want, right? So the more visceral fat that you gain over time, the more that your testosterone is getting suppressed and it's getting literally turned into estrogen. So you're losing your edge as a man. You're losing your fire, your aggression, right? And when I say aggression, it's not like you have anger issues, but you know what I mean, right? As a man, you need to get aggressive sometimes in a sales meeting, in that job interview, right? When you're trying to portray yourself, you want to be passionate about yourself. You don't just want to be this very calm, shy kind of guy. You want to be proud. And so that's what I mean by aggression. And you kind of lose that edge, obviously, when your testosterone is getting suppressed. And so this is a direct and measurable contributor to those lower energy levels, right? Feeling sluggish when you wake up in the morning, never feeling like yourself like you did when you were in your early 20s, right? And this is what a lot of people just chalk up to getting older, right? You're supposed to feel more tired. You're supposed to feel, not like yourself, but again, that's an excuse that people just blame simply on age, when in reality, it's all been along your lifestyle factors that have now caused this visceral fat gain. The second piece to this is that visceral fat drives systemic inflammation, right? So visceral fat contains an inflammatory compound called cytokines. And this is that major contributor to the brain fog, to the slower cognitive processing that you may feel on a daily basis, right? You don't feel as mentally sharp as you want to be, especially when it matters most, right? This is from inflammation internally in your bloodstream, and that's because of those cytokines, because of the visceral fat. The third piece to this is that it worsens insulin sensitivity. So the best way to explain this is that your energy that you consume, it doesn't get converted into energy, right? The carbohydrates, the food you eat, it doesn't necessarily get converted into energy so well because you're low insulin sensitivity, right? You have insulin resistance, the exact opposite, which means that more visceral fat gets stored. And this is just a loop. More visceral fat, right? It's going to cause this insulin resistance, which means more energy and more food that you consume gets converted into more visceral fat rather than, again, being converted into energy. A vicious loop that you can get stuck in very easily. All right, and finally, the fourth piece to this in this third section is that it's a high cardiovascular risk. So independent of your BMI, independent of your total body weight, right? You can still look relatively healthy, right? Have an athletic build, feel okay, be in okay shape overall, right? But again, you can't see this visceral fat. And so that can still be getting stored internally around those organs. And this is when it gets dangerous, because you feel like, oh, I'm not in bad shape. I don't really have to do too much to take care of my health. Maybe there's a 40-year-old out there who thinks, I'm relatively in good shape. I'm in better shape than most of my friends are. All of them are overweight, drinking too much alcohol. So I'm doing okay already, right? And so that's the most dangerous position to be in, when you don't really look or feel too out of shape necessarily, but that's actually in there. And that visceral fat is causing these negative side effects, right? So when you feel that 2 to 4 p.m. energy crash, when you have that mental fog, when especially it matters most to be as mentally sharp as you can, and when you sense that your overall edge that you used to have on other people, and you know what I mean when I say that, if you know what I mean, right? Just having an edge on everybody else, you sense that that's kind of missing or slowly declining. A lot of people in that position, they think, okay, I just need to work harder than I used to. I need to work out more. I need to fix my diet and stop eating carbs overall and take the wrong routes. And in every way, it's not because you're not working hard enough. It's because this visceral fat operating in the background, completely invisible in the mirror. So now you've probably heard enough about how bad this visceral fat is and how dangerous it can be, right? And so let's talk about now section 4, how to actually reverse it and eliminate it. And to start this section, here's what the fitness industry constantly gets wrong: treating visceral fat like it's some fat loss problem, like you just need to go on a calorie deficit and this is what's going to fix that, right? Which is not true. Based on what we've been talking about in this video, it's a cortisol and insulin problem. A calorie deficit is not just going to fix this visceral fat. That's only going to help the subcutaneous fat, what you see. And so now there's 5 pieces in this 4th section that are very, very important. Each have their own place and how to, again, eliminate and reverse all of these side effects of visceral fat. So the first one is just simply managing your cortisol before your calories, before what you are focusing on, what you're eating. If your nervous system is constantly in a sympathetic state, right? Fight or flight mode. Your heart rate is constantly elevated. A calorie deficit is only going to do so much for it, right? It's never going to target that subcutaneous fat. And so what you want to focus on is stress management. It's truly a skill that you need to develop on how to manage your stress properly, especially if you are a business owner, right? Because you are the operator, you are the main engine that runs everything. And if you're constantly a slave to your own cortisol, nothing is going to go into your favor, right? You're just working for nothing because you're building with one hand while the other hand is breaking. You're never able to actually adapt from all of this that you're doing. And so again, the first one to start this off is managing your cortisol first and then focusing on the calories and what you're eating. The second piece is prioritizing your deep sleep. So this goes into sleep quality, not just focusing on 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. If I go to sleep at 10 p.m., I wake up at 6 a.m., that counts as 8 hours of sleep, right? This is not how it works. When you're in that deep sleep mode and deep stage of sleep, this is when cortisol clears. This is when testosterone is produced and rebuilt. This is when growth hormone is released. All of these amazing things that also contribute to visceral fat targeting, right? Where you can actually eliminate that visceral fat. So focusing and making sure that you're getting at least an hour and a half of deep sleep at night, that tells you that you're getting the quality of sleep that you need. And obviously, if you're not tracking your sleep, you're not tracking anything, you don't know what's working or what's not. Part 3 here, and I've said this so many times in all of my videos, but if this is the first time you're watching me, listen to this because it's very important. Zone 2 cardio. Okay, and zone 2 cardio is staying in 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate doing a cardiovascular exercise. You do not want to go out for a zone 4 or a zone 5, especially very high intensity cardio workout, even zone 3, right? After a hard day of work, for example, right? Your nervous system is already stressed. And so you're thinking, man, I still need to get in some exercise for today. So I'm just going to go on a run out in this 90-degree weather heat and get my run in, right? That's the worst thing to possibly do. You're just adding even more stress onto an already stressed nervous system. And so going for zone 2 cardio, that provides the mitochondrial density and efficiency that you want, as well as improves insulin sensitivity overall. And so again, You get all of these great benefits from doing cardio, but you don't activate your sympathetic nervous system, adding more stress. So this is the best of both worlds. You still get your activity in, you still get to burn some calories, you still progress in the right direction without doing it wrong. Without working harder, you're working smarter. So this is when it comes into play of training matching the demands of your mission. Not just working out like a madman, working harder than everybody else, but working harder and most importantly, smarter than everyone else, again, to gain your edge back, to make sure that you're putting your health in the most optimal position for success and high performance. So that for sure is the single most underrated tool for targeting this visceral fat. Fourth piece here, very simple to understand, resistance training. This helps you improve your insulin sensitivity. This also helps you just naturally burn more calories throughout the day, right? But again, that insulin sensitivity, that's going to improve, which in return is going to help, again, target that visceral fat loss, which happens over time. It's not going to happen after a week of going to the gym and working out, right? It takes time, but over a good amount of time, it will reduce that visceral fat, again, in due time. So that is more of a compounding effect and investing now for future benefit, delayed gratification. And the fifth piece here is just to simply track. Again, just so you know that what you're doing is actually working. I tell you to do zone 2, I tell you to work out, I tell you to do all these things to improve your insulin sensitivity and reduce that visceral fat. So you start doing those things that I said, but if you're not tracking it, you don't know if it's actually working. And so again, tracking things, using a DEXA scan for sure, right, to know the amount of visceral fat that you have, because it's not going to show up on the number on the scale or in the mirror. Right? That visceral fat, you can't see it. So getting a DEXA scan is definitely going to help. That way you can compare the numbers after 3, 6, 12 months of kind of working on reducing it, but also metrics like HRV and resting heart rate. Both of these two are going to tell you exactly what is going on with your stress and with your cortisol, with your overall central nervous system. So I've already been talking too long. This is a very, very simple video and health topic to understand. So I hope I explained everything again where you could understand it relatively well. This is, I'm not over exaggerating about that, the dangerous type of body fat. All right, there's that 2 types. There's the stuff that you can see that everybody wants to lose, and the stuff that you can't see that nobody knows about. So start looking into your metrics, start focusing and thinking more about this visceral fat, and if you truly have a problem, right? And try out all the things that I mentioned. I hope you understand that it's not about training harder. You may be in this plateau physically, you're not getting the results you want to see. Cognitively, right? You're starting to feel decline as you age. This is not from just simply not working as hard as you did when you were younger. So you think, I have to work harder now. It's not what it is, right? It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. I'll see you guys in the next video, man.